His second son, Paul Cammett, was born at Casco Bay in Cumberland County, Maine on April 16, 1722, but his birth was recorded in Salisbury, Massachusetts. He was the son of Thomas and Margaret Hallowell. He married Mary Grill on the 6th of December 1748 in Salisbury, Massachusetts. She was born on the 27th of May 1728 at Salisbury, Massachusetts. She was the daughter of Daniel and Sarah Gill. At the time of their marriage he was 26 years old, Mary was 25. The family would settle in Portland, Maine. From this marriage they had 4 known children: Dudley 1749 to 1819, Molly 1751 to 1841, Paul Jr. 1753 to 1820, and Thomas 1763 to 1816. We find the family in their 1790 census for Portland, Maine. His household is listed as having 6 family members. Within the Massachusetts Soldiers and Sailors of the Revolutionary War records, at the top of this page, there are 6 different spellings of the Cammett family name within their service records. Paul with all 3 of his sons would join the Revolutionary War and survive. Paul Sr. enlisted as a 3rd gunner, Paul Jr. as a 1st corporal, and Thomas all in Captain Abner Lowell's, Matrosa's, company, stationed at Falmouth, Cumberland County. In the company report of August 11, 1777, as mustered by Colonel Noyes, agreeable to seacoast establishment. Roll date Falmouth, July 31, 1777. But Paul's exact deployment during the Revolutionary War was also noted. Private, in Captain Joseph Noyes's, Seacoast, Company, enlisted July 11, 1775, service to December 31, 1775, 6 months and 5 days, stationed at Falmouth, Cumberland County. Also, Captain William Crocker's Seacoast Company, marched on June 3, 1776, service to August 31, 1776, 2 months and 28 days, stationed at Falmouth, Cumberland County. Also Captain William Crocker's Company, Colonel Mitchell's Regiment. Service from August 31, 1776, to date of discharged, November 23, 1776, 2 months and 23 days. Stationed at Falmouth, Cumberland County. Also Captain Joseph Pride's Company, Colonel Joseph Prime's Cumberland County Regiment, joined April 27, 1780, discharged December 6, 1780. Service, 7 months and 9 days, at the eastward. Enlisted, 8 months, also list of men in Captain Pride's company, year not given, reported deceased. Paul was very active in the militia throughout the Revolutionary War years. But he also had to provide for his family. So he learned and followed the trade of a cooper and pump and block maker and passed this on to his sons. A block maker made blocks. A block was a set of pulleys or sheaves mounted on a single frame. Every ship needed hundreds of blocks of many different shapes and sizes. One reference suggests that a single, large, sail-powered warship in the mid-19th century required more than 1,400 blocks of various kinds. Ship pump making in the 18th century were basically 3 types: a ship bilge pump used from the 1400s to the 1800s, burr pumps, basically, a cone-shaped leather bucket that drew water up a tube, chain pumps, a continuous chain with small burrs or buckets to catch water and pull it up, running over upper and lower sprockets. Paul died and his death was published in the newspaper Extraction from the Northeast, where it was printed: Cammett, Paul, died at Portland, age 75, cc October 15, 1796. Mary his wife, died in 1798, both in Portland, Maine, at the age of 75. Paul's son, Dudley Cammett, was baptized at Salisbury, Massachusetts, on October 1, 1749. When he was 25 years old, he became a patriot along with his father and brothers when he enlisted as a corporal in Captain Joseph Noyes' Sea Coast Company, enlisted July 11, 1775, service to December 31, 1775, 6 months 5 days. Stationed at Falmouth, Cumberland County, also 2nd Lieutenant, in Captain Nathaniel Deering's 7th Company. In Colonel Peter Noyes' 1st Cumberland Company Regiment. In the list of officers of Massachusetts Militia. Ordered in Council, February 1, 1777, that a commission be issued. At some point in time, unbeknown to us, Dudley married and quickly became a widower, but after the war, he would marry for a second time a woman named Mary. Her last name and when they married is hidden from us. By this union a son was born in 1789, in Portland, Maine. They named him, Dudley Cammett Jr. Dudley was 40 years old when his son was born, Mary was about 47. The Portland Gazette on April 9, 1810, a Monday, on page 3, the paper published the city's elected positions. One of these job titles was for tithingman. Listed were 21 men that were elected to this position. 2 of them were Dudley Cammett Sr. and Benjamin Dodge. Dudley was 61 years old and Benjamin was 35 at that time. Benjamin is my second cousin 6 times removed and Dudley Sr. is your first cousin 7 times removed. I knew if I kept searching, I would find a distanced relative connected in some way to the Cammetts. Now the question is, what is a tithingman and what are his responsibilities? The job of the tithingman, which dates back to the earliest days of the New England colonies, went beyond policing people who were supposed to be in church. A key responsibility was to maintain order in church during the long, and sometimes tedious, services. To assist him in his duties, many tithing men were given a long staff. One end was rounded or sharp and on the other a soft implement was attached, such as a feathery deer tail or rabbit's foot. When the tithingman spotted an unruly child acting up, he would get a rap on the head with the hard end. Similarly, a man nodding off during the service would get a pop on the head to wake him. Women who dozed off got a tickle with the other end of the pole and a harder poke if that failed to wake them. Women often got away with a little nap during church because the bonnets or hats they sometimes wore blocked the tithingman's view of their faces. Most ministers encouraged the tithingmen to be vigilant, as they disliked seeing people sleeping in the pews. The tithingmen often had plenty to do, especially as the services dragged on. Since many New Englanders spent most of their time working, some took the notion of a day of rest literally. The wisest course was to simply apologize when the tithingman corrected your behavior. That's because they often had the power to arrest someone or put them in the stocks if they were unruly. Outside the church, the tithingmen also had to make sure children received the proper schooling in the Bible. They also had to keep an eye on the taverns to make sure people didn't get drunk. Most towns had several tithingmen to enforce the Puritans' rules, which they took very seriously. But perhaps the most important duty of the tithingman was to see that people were paying their proper share in contributions to the church and city. Dudley Sr. provided for his family in the profession, as taught to him by his father, that being a block maker. Dudley Sr. will fall sick and passed on January 21, 1819, in Portland, Maine. His death records only revealed the date of his death and age with no other information. His cemetery records the same information but disclosed his second marriage to Mary and her death that occurred on April 26, 1824 at the age of 83. Also, where they were buried in Eastern Cemetery in Portland. His obituary was published in the United States, newspaper extracted from the Northeast. There it printed the following. Cammett, Dudley, died in Portland, age 70, cc July 3, 1819. Their burial location and photos of their gravestones can be found on a website named Find a Grave maintained by its members and owned by Ancestry.com. Next we will look at some interesting facts concerning his son, Captain Dudley Cammett Jr. Dudley Cammett Jr. was born in 1789 in Portland, Maine to Lieutenant Dudley Sr. and Mary Cammett. Growing up by Casco Bay, he learned shipbuilding skills from his father and uncles, specializing in creating and laying blocks for ship keels and pulley blocks. His family's history in shipbuilding is detailed in an obituary for his cousin, Captain William Cammett, published by the Portland Daily Press on April 7, 1880. The account provides valuable insights into the Cammett family history. What follows are excerpts from that obituary with some added inserts for clarity. Captain William Cammett was the son of Thomas, who was Dudley Sr.'s brother, and the grandson of Paul Cammett, the first of the name who came to Portland, and who was born in 1722. He followed the trade of a cooper and pump and block maker. He died in 1796. Of his 4 sons, the one best known was Dudley Sr., who lived and had a wharf at the foot of Hancock Street, where he pursued the business of his father. He, Dudley Sr., was a lieutenant in the Army of the Revolution. The obituary carried on about Captain William's extraordinary life and family, who we will cover next, but the reporter also printed the following statement. Dudley was a well-known pump and block maker, and one of his sons continues the old family trade on Commercial Street and was the 4th generation who has pursued the same business in Portland. The person he referred to was actually his cousin, Captain Dudley Cammett Jr., who took over his father's, Dudley Sr., business after his death in 1819, and then Dudley Jr.'s son, John Cammett, took over the business after his father's death in 1863, was the 4th generation to carry on the family business. This reporter was recalling events within the family that took place some 17 years ago. It is true that Thomas and his brothers took part in Dudley Sr.'s block makers' businesses. But the true identity of the family that owned the block makers of Portland was discovered in their documents that plainly point to Dudley Sr., then Jr., and eventually his son John, as the only proprietors of that business. Because their ownership in that company were disclosed in their tax records in 1864. It listed John Cammett as the executive and his sisters and brothers as legacy of the first class, with each person valuation in dollars and tax burden. The children of Captain Dudley Cammett that were listed was, John, Charles W., Harriet, Abby, Mary and Caroline. These were the living children at this time with clear ownership in business. During the War of 1812, at the age of 25, Dudley Jr. would join Captain Moody's company in Lieutenant Colonel Nichols' regiment from September and October of 1812 in service at Portland, Maine. He held the rank of lieutenant. Also serving him was his first cousin, John Cammett, the son of Captain William who we previously mentioned. A year later he would marry Betsy Williams on March 12, 1815, at Portland, Maine. He was 26 years old and she was 21 at that time. From their union they would have 8 children, 6 girls, and 2 boys. Dudley, now 34, on January 28, 1823, files a court action for land partition for severalty, in the Court of Common Pleas in Portland, Maine. He claims he is a tenant in common, with a person to him unknown, a certain lot of land situated in Portland. The land was described in words, and then he continues, the said Dudley's share a proportion of said lot, is 1 undivided 7th part thereof, and that he is desirous of holding the same in severalty. Severalty refers to the exclusive possession and control over a property or a legal right without sharing it with any other person. It is the quality or state of being distinct or separate. He continues, therefore prays, that after due proceedings had, his said, shares may be divided and set off to him in severalty, pursuant to the statute in such cases provided. Dudley is seeking a clear title for his part of the property he owns. The outcome of his partition is unknown, but I am confident he was successful. Now 36, he is appointed a trustee in the Maine Charitable Mechanic Association. This association was appointed to solicit donations of books for their library, which is under the care of this association. Dudley family is heavily into investing and promoting mechanical pumps for the shipping industry. Dudley is appointed fire ward in Portland, in 1828. Portland at this time had no organized fire department, therefore it must, at their annual meeting, elect at least one fire ward. In 1830, we see Dudley advertising in the newspaper for selling lignum vitae under the business name of Cammett and Connor. What is lignum vitae? It referred to as wood of life, is derived from the genus Guiacum and is known for being one of the hardest and densest woods in the world. It is highly valued for its durability, making it suitable for applications such as shipbuilding, bearings, and tool handles due to its resistance to water and rot. In 1831 he is once again appointed fire ward of Portland at the age of 42. Newspaper article, in the Eastern Argus, Portland, Maine, Tuesday, February 21, 1832. Headline: For President, Andrew Jackson. Portlanders wanted to send a message to President Jackson and Congress, stating they were following their instruction about forming committees for the upcoming celebrations. Americans will once again celebrate Washington's birthday, long before Congress declared it a federal holiday. The centennial of his birth prompted festivities nationally. Congress declared cities and towns across America should establish joint committees to arrange for this occasion. In Portland, they appointed 10 individuals to sit on this committee and Dudley was one of them. The Committee of Arrangements, for the centennial celebration, to observe the birthday of General George Washington, who was born on February 22, 1732, was to set up schedules for prayers, music, songs, and speeches. The celebrations will begin with national salutes being fired at sunrise, noon, and sunset. Bells shall ring at sunrise, flags shall be displayed on the shipping in the harbor, public buildings will be illuminated in the evening with fireworks displayed. At the end of the day, a fine time was had by all. Newspaper article, 1839, explaining new rules and regulations governing fires within the city of Portland, was announced. All fire wards were ordered to inspect the properties where fires are kept or used, in areas of their responsibility. Dudley was now responsible for wards 1, 2, and 3. By the dawn of the 19th century, tuberculosis or consumption had killed 1 in 7 of all people that had ever lived. Throughout much of the 1800s, patients sought the cure in sanatoriums, where it was believed that rest and a healthy climate could change the course of the disease. This family would not be spared from the suffering and death from this disease. Margaret Cammett, their second child, was the first to die from consumption. She was born in 1818 in Portland and died on June 13, 1843. Her obituary appeared in the Portland Free Press Herald on Monday, June 12, 1843, where it was written: In the city, on Saturday, Miss Margaret Cammett, daughter of Captain Dudley Cammett, 25, funeral tomorrow at 4:00 p.m. Relatives and friends are requested to attend. 4 years later, their first child, Elizabeth Williams Cammett, would succumb to the same disease, on February 21, 1847 at the age of 31. Her cause of death was stated in her records as consumption. Mr. and Mrs. Cammett would proceed, the loss of their last child born, Caroline Jordan Cammett, the cause of her death was listed, in her death records, as consumption, in 1876 at the age of 39. Her obituary was placed in the Portland Daily Press on Saturday, August 12, 1876, on page 2. It read as follows: The funeral services of the late J. Cammett will take place this Saturday afternoon at 3:00 at the residence of Dr. J. R. Lieut, number 31 State Street. Burial at the convenience of the family. Mr. Lieut was Caroline's brother-in-law, her sister's, Abby Cammett's, husband, who was also a veteran of the Civil War, who served as a private in the 7th Infantry Regiment of the Maine Volunteers. They were all buried in the family plots in Eastern Cemetery in Portland. The captain was 59 when his business, Cammett and Connor, was dissolved with notices in the Portland Press Herald, on April 19, 1848. The notice was hereby given that the co-partnership heretofore existed under the name of Cammett and Connor, is this day dissolved. All unsettled accounts will be adjusted by either partner. Dated April 17, 1848. D. Cammett informs his friends and the public that he continues the pump and block making business in the lower end of the old shop, which has been occupied by Cammett and Connor for the past 30 years. 8 months later, Dudley, a fire ward, house was involved in a fire with losses above $1,500. Within Dudley's selected federal census for non-population schedules, 1850 to 1880, we get a glimpse into his business. The census listed all corporations, companies, or individuals, producing articles to the annual value of $500. The census listed the name of the business, their capital invested in real estate in the business, raw materials used, kind of motive power, whether machinery or resource, such a person indicated as a hand, average hands employed, men and or females. Lastly, annual products, quantities, kind, and value. For Dudley, a block maker, $2,000 capital investment, raw materials, 450 feet of logs, value $27, lignum vitae, 3 tons, value, $105, and other articles, value $44. 3 men employed, no woman, an average monthly wages $48. Worth today equals $1,950, per employee $650. Annual products, pumps $190, blocks $700, worth today equals $36,000. In 1861, President Lincoln imposes the first federal income tax by signing the Revenue Act. Strapped for cash with which to pursue the Civil War, Lincoln and Congress agreed to impose a 3% tax on annual incomes over $800. An example of these new taxes collected by the city of Portland within District 1, monthly lists, September 1862 through December 1864. We find Dudley Pump and Block Business, first assessment was for $43.88 at 3% equals $1.32 in taxes. And the second was assessed at $160.95 for $4.83 in taxes. His total equivalent amount of taxes today would equal $250. In the family's 1850 United States Census, we find Dudley Cammett, head of household, age 61, a block maker, with the real estate valued at $9,000. His wife Betsy, age 57, Charles W., age 27, Harriet N., age 20, Abby E., age 18, Mary J., age 15, and Caroline J., age 13. Then on September 30, 1858, at the age of 69, Mr. Cobb files for foreclosure on land and buildings by granting of a deed of mortgage, dated August 30, 1845, by 3 secure payments of $416.66 each, and interest. Mr. Cobbs claimed that Cammett has broken the conditions of the note by the non-payment of the last note therein described, according to the terms thereof. The outcome of this action is not known at this time. The Portland Press-Herald newspaper on September 12, 1859, printed notice for citizens who were selected to sit on the grand jury. Dudley was called to serve. He was 70 years old. On a cool fall Tuesday, November 22, 1859, 2 days before Thanksgiving, 30 states and 3 territories observed Thanksgiving on the last Thursday of November. That year, everyone hoped that all states and territories would join. Sadly, Dudley's wife fell very ill that day and passed away from apoplexy within 6 hours. She was buried alongside her daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, in Eastern Cemetery in Portland. Apoplexy is a sudden failure of the pituitary gland which causes severe bleeding and a loss of oxygen to the tissues of the pituitary gland, causing tissue death. The Civil War began on April 12, 1861, when the Confederacy bombarded Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Many Cammetts answered the call to defend the nation, and their stories are now woven into the fabric of our flag and remembered by their descendants. March 2, 1863, at the age of 74, Dudley sold his land on India Street to Captain Knight for $4,500. $4,500 in 1850 is equivalent in purchasing power today of about $183,270. In the Portland, Maine City Directory for 1863 we see the Cammett families listed. His business, listed as Cammett D & Sons, Block Makers, at 99 Commercial, House 36, India Street. His son Charles W., at 99 Commercial, Buildings on 36, India Street. His son John, associated with D. Cammett, at 99 Commercial, House at 6 Mountfort Street. William, who we earlier identified as Captain Williams, who was Dudley's first cousin, Custom House Officer, 18, Cross Street. The following Cammetts are Captain Williams' children and cousins of Dudley's. George H. Cammett, a soldier. He enlisted as a private in the 1st Maine Infantry in Company D. Stephen, 238 Commercial, House at 19 Smith Street. Warren H., seaman, at 18 Cross Street. He served in the United States Navy. On a spring day in the city, on June 15, 1863, in the Portland Daily Press, under the obituary section, it printed the following. June 4, Captain Cammett, age 74 years. Boston papers please copy. This was all the information that was printed, but later, in other printed words, they called him, and I quote, the greatest block maker of Maine. Those words were printed in the Kennebec Journal on Tuesday, October 25, 1898, in his son, John's obituary. But within the Maine, United States Veterans Cemetery records, it disclosed the following information, that he was buried in Eastern Cemetery, in Portland, Maine, his name, Dudley Cammett, birth date, 1789, death date, June 14, 1863, buried in Section A, Tomb 10. War, 1812, Branch of Service, Army, enlisted, September 7, 1814. Rank, Lieutenant, War Record, in Captain Moody's company under Lieutenant Nichols' regiment. Type of markers, upright stone and marker. The family burial location and photos of their gravestones can be found on a website named Find a Grave, maintained by its members and owned by Ancestry.com. Dudley's son, John, placed a notice in the Portland Daily Press on a Tuesday, July 7, 1863, which stated the following. The partnership under the name D. Cammett & Son, being dissolved by death of the senior partner, the business of the late firm will be settled by the junior partner, who will continue the block and pump making business at the old stand, number 99, Commercial Street, head of Portland Pier. Signed, John Cammett. Dudley Jr.'s son, John, did take over the family business because we found in their IRS tax assessment for September 1862 through December 1864. Their disclosures were taken on July 1864. The owners were recorded as follows. John Cammett, executive of Dudley Cammett, for Charles W. Cammett, son. Harriet N. Cammett, daughter, John Cammett, son, Abby E. Lunt, daughter, Mary Fox, daughter, and Caroline J., daughter. They were all listed as legacy of the first class within the Articles of Corporation. Their assessed value and tax owed starting with Charles was $1,577, Harriet $1,181, John $1,106, Abby $1,106, Mary $1,106, and Caroline $1,181. Their total taxes owed was $54. Just to confuse you all some more, Captain Dudley Cammett Jr.'s son, John, would carry on with the business after his father's death in 1863. He was your third cousin 5 times removed. He married Mary Elizabeth Harris on May 14, 1853 in New Gloucester, Cumberland, Maine. During their marriage they had no children. John would continue in the block-making business until his death on October 23, 1898 from Bright's disease. He was 70 years old. In his death records his occupation was listed as a block maker. His parents were Dudley Cammett and Betsy Williams. His wife Mary died from a tumor in 1883 at the age of 57. They are both buried in Evergreen Cemetery in Portland. In his obituary in the Kennebec Journal on October 25, 1898 on page 4 it read, "John Cammett, the oldest block maker in Portland, died Sunday. He was 53 years in business in that city, succeeding his father, Dudley Cammett, for many years the great block maker of Maine." Although I did not list any daughter in the introduction of Captain Dudley's children being covered within this video, I have since uncovered important information about one of them. The daughter in question is Harriet Newell Cammett. Harriet was born on November 19, 1825 in Portland. From all accounts she was dedicated to her father and the family business right up and after the death of her father in 1863. Just about a year after her father's death, at the age of 39 she married for the first time, a 40-year-old merchant from Cambridge, Massachusetts. His name was Levi Weatherby. They were married on November 29, 1864 in Boston. Their marriage was reported in the Portland Daily Press on Wednesday, November 30, 1864, where it printed the following. "Marriage in church yesterday at 1 o'clock. The bell at the parish church sent out its merry bells and thousands thronged the sidewalks and filled the step of the church, all anxious to meet Mr. Levi Witherby of Boston, and Miss Harriet N. Cammett of the city, from the carriage and conduct her to the hymeneal altar. Soon they came, quite a number of friends, and walked through the crowd into the church where Dr. Schaller united them in the bonds of matrimony. The bride was modestly dressed, not having the wedding garments on, as she is about to journey to a far country. Dr. Stuller made a few pertinent remarks and then performed the marriage ceremony, altar which he made a brief and fervent prayer for the blessings of heaven to descend and rest upon them. Seldom on any occasion have we seen this church so crowded as it was on this day. The galleries were filled and all the pews below occupied with anxious spectators. It was a great congregation. We are sorry to lose Miss Cammett, whose voice has so often thrilled the hearts of our citizens with sweet music. We esteem her one of the best vocalists in New England, and but few American singers have ever attained so much perfection in the art and science of music as Harriet N. Cammett. We understand our songstress has taken her flight to the west and will pass the winter in Chicago. Our best wishes to her and her husband. It is gratifying to state that the bride received numerous and useful presents, among which was splendid tea service, presented by some of the members of the First Parish Church, who have so long been delighted with her musical notes. Tragedy would befall Harriet just 7 months after her marriage to Levi. He became ill and passed away from Bright's disease on June 29, 1865. In her husband's last will he appointed his wife, Harriet, and a man named Henry Johnson executors. He bequeathed, third, all my household furniture, books, pictures, and wearing apparel, and also the sum of $10,000 for her sole use, which in today's value would equal approximately $200,000. Another year would pass when another tragedy would not only befall Harriet but well over 10,000 people who lived in the Portland area. What happened then was captured in a video created by Shamus Ali and narrated by Chaz Gilly, and was posted on Facebook and presented here for information and education purposes only.
July 4th, 1866, Portland was an industrious and prosperous city by the sea. Weekly steamships ran between Portland and Liverpool, while the Grand Trunk Railway connected Maine to Montreal. More than 30,000 people call Portland home, including large populations of Dutch, French, and Irish immigrants. It was expected to be a day of celebration, the first Independence Day since the troops came home from the Civil War. Instead, Portland would endure the worst urban fire the nation had ever seen. In just over 15 hours, an estimated 10,000 people would be made homeless, and more than a third of the city would be destroyed, causing property losses totaling more than $10 million, what would be hundreds of millions of dollars today. The fire alarm was sounded at around 5 p.m., and the fire quickly spread to Upham's flouring mill. By 8 p.m., the fire had spread to the Brown Sugar House and proceeded northerly through the wooden buildings between Center and Cross Street. By 10 p.m., it had spread across much of the business district to the corner of Federal and Exchange Streets. The fire then crossed Congress Street and gutted the brand new City Hall, largely thought to be fireproof. By 3 a.m., the fire had reached as far to the east as the foot of India Street and as far north as Munjoy Hill. By morning, the fire ran out of fuel after reaching the open city-owned pasture land abutting Munjoy Hill. By the time it was out, the fire had leveled over 1,500 buildings, destroyed 58 streets, and laid waste to a total area of nearly 200 acres. Portland rebuilt at an astounding rate. By November of 1866, it's reported that between 600 and 700 buildings had already been constructed, with more than 1,000 more in development. Within 5 years, Portland had recovered from the fire. Roads were widened and made more accessible, a new fire signal was installed, and a plan was developed to pipe in water from Sebago Lake. Portland, Maine had truly lived up to its motto, Resurgam, Latin for I will rise again.
As we all witnessed the devastating Great Fire that destroyed Cammett's childhood home in Portland. Shortly after the fire, Harriet contacted a designer named George Burnham to design a new home on 96 to 100 India Street in Portland to replace the previous structure destroyed in the Great Fire of 1866. It had been the family home of her father and mother, Dudley and Betsy Cammett, up until his death in 1863. Harriet had purchased the right-end unit of the then fairly new row house at the bottom of 31 State Street after her father's death. She retained that residence throughout her life. She married again. He was a very successful merchant, real estate developer, director of the Portland and Kennebec and Maine Central Railroad, and founder of the Maine General Hospital and a quartermaster in the Civil War, and the list goes on. His name was Horatio Nelson Jose Sr. and they married on October 8, 1891. He was 72 and a widower. Harriet was 65. And it would happen again a year and 5 days after her marriage. Horatio would die on October 23, 1892, and he was laid to rest in Evergreen Cemetery in Portland. Harriet would follow and died of old age on August 11, 1911, and she would be buried with her father in Evergreen Cemetery in Portland. In 1924, a picture was taken of the home at 96 and 100 India Street. The house on 96 and 100 India Street in Portland is currently listed as a 5 to 10 family and is in very good shape. It is the India Street district and such, falls under the city's historic preservation guidelines. This will conclude the life story of Captain Dudley Cammett Jr. and some of his family members. We will continue with Paul Cammett's children, up next his second son, Paul Jr., and then his third son, Thomas, both brothers of Lieutenant Dudley Cammett Sr.